hello everyone. This is me, Adnan Gauri, the founder and director of iWorkstation. I welcome you all for the online BIM series week 6 by Clive Jordan. So Clive is actually the CEO of the LOD Planner. Clive was even a part of the team that founded the Vico software, created the world's first fully integrated 4D and 5D BIM data sets, defined the first LOD, progression specifications, and he has also helped establish the world's first BIM contract for the people. Over his 20 years BIM journey, Clyde has interned as an architect, earned a first-class civil engineering master's degree, got his boots dirty for 6 years as a contractor, spent a lot of time in the BIM industry, and his area of expertise is mostly into making the BIM execution plans and the LOD. So I would like to welcome Clyde Jordan, the CEO and founder of the LOD Planner. Yes, Clyde.
Thank you, Adnan, for the introduction. Today we're going to talk about BIM management made simple. At our team, we have a motto. It's Smart Lean BIM. And we even wear it on the backs of our shirts. And that is our reminder that if you do BIM in the wrong way, it is not good for the project and it can be more money. And so we coined this term, the right BIM at the right time, by the right people, but specifically for the right reasons. So always know why you're going to do BIM. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, it might be wasteful. Otherwise, somebody might not use it later on down the line. So that's our key motto. Today, we're going to go through, and we had the poll, we're going to go through a bit of why BIM management and why BIM. And then we'll look at BIM execution planning, and we'll look at why you create a BIM execution plan to get everybody on board and to agree on process. And then we'll talk about the scoping workflow and understanding how you define in a 3D model, when is it important to do certain things, who is responsible for it, what detail, what geometry, what information, how accurate it is, all of those really important things that you need to define so that you can agree across different companies where and how that model is going to be created. And then the third one is really important, because if you even just have a great plan, if you can't execute on that plan, if you can't actually run a timeline, a schedule, a program of all of those events and get things completed, then there was no good in having the plan in the first place. So we'll cover those three things. Adnan, anything to add? Anything that you want to share with the group before we?
Yeah, sure. After the session, we'll take the question and answers. So any of the people who have the question can ask directly to the Clive. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'll have 3 resources at the end as well, some links to go to read some more and to improve your BIM skills to that top level. So yeah, I'll share those links as well via the WhatsApp. Cool. So let's get started. First of all, I know that you have been on a series, on a journey of learning about BIM, and BIM can be many things. So you've learned about how, I'm sure, to create models in different tools and the purposes of that. I know that a few of my friends have been presenting, and some of it about generative design, some of it about really, really cool things to create models. And those models that are created can be used for many, many different things. Here we see a few of them. You might create it for visualization, for some kind of analysis or some kind of clash or quantification. You might use it to walk the owner through the building. You might use it for the owner to manage and maintain the building. Or you might just use it as a pretty picture to be able to render and share that with others to see what the building is going to look like before you build it. So there's a lot of uses for models. But we ask ourselves, what is BIM? Is this BIM? Adnan, is this BIM? Maybe.
Not exactly. It's actually just a model.
It's just a model. So this model, is it the model that we asked for? Is it the model that's going to be useful? can that model fulfill the uses or the BIM uses or the model uses that we were planning for? I don't know, but then let's take a step forward. Is this one BIM? So was the first one, was that BIM? Or is this BIM? It's a model, it's just a model. Yeah, but it might be the one that people would like. So would we like more elements in the model? Is there data attached to these models? Who's responsible for these? Is there handover information that's required at the end of that? And then we ask ourselves, well, if this isn't BIM, what about this? And really all we're doing is putting more and more elements into the building. They're all great models and they could be used for one of those different purposes. And it's really important to define that, because if you created the model on the right-hand side and you actually only needed the model on the left-hand side, you will have spent too much money and too much time. And nobody's going to be happy about that. So we have to agree on what BIM should be before we go and spend a lot of time doing it. Because in our industry, we're trying to save money by using this new method of creating better outputs and being more efficient. And having a good communication can avoid these costly miscommunication and misalignments that can cost a lot of money in the industry. So in our tool set as a BIM manager, I'm sure you've heard a lot about all of these tools, the authoring, analysis, and use tools, and they are fantastic. They are really, really great tools, but our industry has neglected planning for these tools, for this workflow and understanding. And in our industry, we've currently used project management tools that are generally inefficient and disconnected. And one of the things that we do at LOD Planner is make that highly efficient and much more connected to the workflow. So I can talk and walk through these. I'm not going to focus too much on the tool specifically, but what we really need is a dedicated workflow to help BIM managers to become more efficient. And so the three modules that you can get access to for free, and this is the advert for LOD Planner: Plan, Scope, and Flow. Plan, Scope, and Track. We updated the module. Tracking and controlling is the third module. So the plan, BIM execution plans, we'll talk in depth about these, but being able to create something from templates to communicate with the team exactly what the workflows are going to be. How are you going to run coordination? Who is going to be involved in the decision-making about BIM uses? Who is going to be part of the team, and what are their roles going to be? There's a lot of really, really important information that needs to be captured in a BIM execution plan. The scoping is all about understanding who needs to do what at what point in time and agreeing on that, the who, the what, the when, and the why in a visual way. And then the tracking is about controlling the tasks that you've just created. So let's take a very quick look at what I'm talking about. And in this workflow, and I promise the advert for the tool will be out of the way soon, but being able to use templates to drag and drop and create your BIM execution plan makes it so much easier for those teams that are having to create these all of the time. You can review and agree and approve these between your teams. And then in a simple visual way, you can use the scoping grid, again, to drag and drop the information that you need, the elements that you need, apply the information requirements that are needed for the owner and for other parties, and understand the development as that model progresses from estimate use to coordination to documentation, and being able to output that into a rich contract and an agreement. So a lot of services providers are providing this as a method to create a contract. And then tracking and controlling these is imperative to be able to get that done and get that shared with everyone else. So that workflow of managing who does what when and getting it to completion is really, really what we focus on, and making that a simple workflow. So let's talk about BIM execution plans. Adnan, How much have you talked about BIM execution plans so far in the series?
Not much. We just had a one session about the BIM one or two sessions. One session was by Pat, another session was by Ashwini Kumar Jha, in which he has discovered the BIM execution plans. Yeah.
And this is one of the most important documents in a project. It is a government mandate as part of the workflow in the UK. There is a workflow that is around the world adopting and adapting a need for a BIM execution plan or a project execution plan, or what we used to call it when I was an owner was a project implementation plan. They're all about how to define the structure for the project. And it needs to be something that is agreed on by all parties in order for you to get started on the right foot. Otherwise BIM can be sometimes pretty difficult without one and without those agreements. But at the moment, if you are looking in the industry to solve this challenge, there are lots of teams trying to create workflows around a contract produced in a word processing and then sent as a PDF on an email. And what we have found is that not all teams can understand what it is they need to do and when they need to do it. And everything gets bottlenecked, everything gets stored up into a PDF. And so unfortunately, a lot of the time, when you create, and as a BIM manager, you spend a lot of time creating a BIM execution plan, they end up in the bottom drawer and they don't get used. And so when you as a BIM manager, you try and create a BIM execution plan and then everyone ignores it and everyone throws it away or puts it in the bottom drawer and doesn't use it, it's almost not worth doing it in the first place. So that is a real challenge. That's a real problem, and we would really love to try and solve that, and that's something that we can talk about in a lot more detail through the question and answer session as well. So all about how to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the second part that we talking about is scoping, and how do you agree on, remember the three models that we had on the screen? How do we agree on which model that we should be achieving? Which one is the right model to be using? We looked at the one on the left-hand side all the way through to the one on the right-hand side. And then somewhere in between might be the right model that we need. But how do we define all of the things that we need? There are many, many different parts to the model. As Adnan says, was the first one a BIM? Did it have the right geometry? Did it have the geometry at the level of reliability? Was it at the right level of accuracy? Do we have the right information attached to it? And what was the real purpose behind creating it in the first place? So all of these different parts of that workflow and all of those different parts of the purpose of creating a model need to be defined. And it's really pretty difficult. As a BIM manager, this is your job though. Your job is to, first of all, define all of these for the whole of the scope of the project. And then it's to manage, track, and control them so that they get delivered at the right time by the right person. And it's pretty tough. It's really tough. And unfortunately, what happens is if you haven't got those things in place, we end up having missing BIM, where sometimes you are halfway through a project and you realize that nobody modeled the light fitting. Or you end up with too much BIM, and it could be that you have 7 different people that modeled the light fitting. It might be the architect modeled it early on, the owner had their own object that they wanted to use, maybe the interior designer also modeled it, maybe the electrical engineer, and maybe the contractor. They all created a light fixture, and that's too much BIM. So you can go from either end, where you either have not enough, where you missed scope and you have scope gaps in the model, or you can go all the way to the other side and have more than one person doing the same thing, which is waste. So the third part that we wanted to focus on was about being able to track and control those things. So once you've created that nice scope that understands exactly who does what at what point in time, how much detail, how much geometry, how much information, how accurate, you then need to be able to track and control those things. And as you track and control it, you might find yourself spending time in long and challenging coordination meetings as a BIM manager. And the raise of hands, the virtual raise of hands, I'm sure that nobody will put their hand up saying that they enjoy spending 3 hours in a coordination meeting. So we see people that resolve those challenges by routing around other elements. So if there was a clash and the pipe had to route around this cable tray, we would see that as being a resolved clash, but not necessarily in the right way, because it's a lot more expensive to put the additional bends in, maybe the welds, maybe more supports and more pipe than it would be to just bend the cable tray around the pipe. So this is a really important part of the BIM management workflow. After you've defined the right scope, you need to then manage that workflow to completion in the most efficient way possible. So what if we could avoid those clashes before they occurred? What if we could run a clash avoidance workflow? And so the principle of, we've covered BIM execution planning, all about process. We've covered scoping, all about who does what when. But the clash avoidance part is about getting it done and achieving the right sequence of events. So one of the things as a BIM manager you have to think about is the system priority structure. How are you going to make sure that the right things get fixed in the model first, and then later on down the line, you're going to make sure that the other things that are more flexible or less costly to move around others are later in that hierarchy. So if you run this system priority structure, you'll see that the one on the left-hand side that was solving that problem, that clash, it achieved the result of 0 clashes, but it didn't achieve the most efficient output for the modeling, for the project. So the correct priority was that the pipe had priority and the cable tray was routed around it. And as a BIM manager, you have to manage these teams that are creating models so that we can get the right outcome. And the solution is to be early and sequence and allow teams to know that that's going to be the case, so that the pipe will take priority and will have a better outcome as a result. We actually had a case study where we had 2 teams, Team A and Team B. They went through a couple of different scenarios, and it was to test this theory of system priority. So prioritizing certain things as a foundation before putting in others. And the results were pretty astounding. When you ran that process of clash avoidance and the sequencing beforehand and having a very tactile session between the teams, we saw a 73% reduction in issues. Issues meaning clashes, problems that came up that could cause issues that were not necessarily clashes, but really required more time from the team to solve. And that was an amazing, amazing case study where we had 2 teams that were willing to spend their time and running this analysis, and they actually got to swap. So we had both teams do both of the different methods, and that is the average of those results. What we saw as a result was moving away from the traditional, very long phase-based design process to a smaller bite-sized set of milestones, starting the right trades at the right time and allowing them to have conversations to make sure that they can prioritize systems and run clash avoidance. And if we look at each one of these milestones, we have to define the purpose. We have to define why we are doing it. And as a BIM manager, we would be going through building that scope and understanding what those milestones were. whether they were design review type milestones, or am I building this model for a cost estimate? Am I building it for coordination, for handover? And then I'll build the scope that's required for the project as a whole. And I'll start to complete the grid to understand what elements I'm going to need for that purpose, for that item. So here for the cost estimation milestone, there'll be certain elements that are required for the ability to create a cost. And then for handover, we might need more or less elements. For coordination, we might need more or less elements. So being able to define that in a way that's really granular enough for teams to manage and control is incredibly important. But then, as I mentioned, to achieve this avoidance process, the clash avoidance process, it's all about sequencing those elements. So the best way to have feedback is when you're in person. We have video, which is great, but when you have somebody right next to you and you can have a conversation and you can achieve an understanding of, I need to put my ceiling in before you fix your light fixture at that elevation. Otherwise, if I put my ceiling in afterwards, you'll have to move your light fixture. So therefore, the sequence of those events is incredibly important. So we create these cards, we chop them up, we have these sessions where we start to, on either the construction site or in the office, sequence and do something called pull planning. A lot more detail on pull planning, I'm sure can be in other webinars as well. We also have webinars on pull planning. But understanding that sequence so that somebody doesn't create something in the model too early or too late. And that is an important part of that BIM management process. And so what we end up with is a sequence of events, and then we can start to schedule those out and understand how long the phase or that stage is going to take, and be able to really get the best out of our coordination process. So we like to make it easy and call them three things: the planning, the scoping, and then the tracking. But it's really about that BIM management role and making sure that you have a simple communication with the team on what the processes are, who actually is going to do what when, and then be able to sequence things so that you can run a clash avoidance workflow rather than a clash detection workflow. I promised some resources and I promised some time for talking as well. So I want to pause there, Adnan, and just share 3 resources, and I can share those links with the people on the channel.